The ultimate guide to help you plan your first itinerary and trip to Japan. With so many amazing places in Japan and they've just reopened, where should you go on your first trip? Now I'm also going to be talking about some itineraries that I recommend on future trips or things you can connect to my suggested itinerary, and I'm also going to be talking about some well-known itineraries in Japan that actually, in fact, I don't recommend. But before we dive into these itineraries and places to go for your first trip to Japan, first we need to understand Japan in general as a country, as a place, as transportation. And so the first thing I want to take a look at is their bullet train network called the Shinkansen. And so I'm going to make this big so you can see it. But in Japan, and I'm going to put me up in the little corner here on this big thing. So these are the routes of the Shinkansen, the bullet train. You can see Tokyo is kind of the hub where these different spurs come off of it. And so the places that are going to be really easy to get to in Japan are places that the bullet train run to. Now, when we look at Japan as a country, you know, it's a pretty big place. If we look at it right here, Okinawa, this island nation, is a part of Japan, which I don't recommend for your first trip, but it's kind of like Japan's version of Hawaii. And then an area that a lot of people don't really think about maybe all that much is Hokkaido, which is in the north. This is the region where they've got some of the best snow. And then down here in the south, Kyushu is another pretty neat region, particularly if you're looking to get off the beaten path. But what we're going to focus on for the beginning part of this video and planning session is the areas of Tokyo, Kyoto, Osaka, often known as the Golden Route of Japan. You'll hear this term. It's advertised very heavily, the Golden Route of Japan. And so I want to dive into Google Earth to show you Japan, and we'll talk through some of these routes. So the Golden Route of Japan, and you'll see brochures on this, you'll see it on Expedia, you'll see it on all these people that promote Japan packages. Basically, the Golden Route of Japan starts you in Tokyo, right around here, takes you kind of through the mountain regions near Mount Fuji to Hakone, and then brings you down to Kyoto that you see over here, and Osaka in the end. And that's basically the Golden Route. And a lot of the tour companies advertise the Golden Route in 10 days or something like that. And boy, I really honestly recommend for your first trip in Japan not doing the Golden Route as advertised, because you spend all your time in trains, planes, and automobiles, well, maybe not cars, but trains and planes, and you don't spend that much time seeing the country if what you're trying to do is spend 10 days and experience Japan. If you are set on the Golden Route, I'd actually suggest you fly it in reverse, like fly into Osaka and then go the other way, because you'll honestly have a few less people on those trains, because most people are going Tokyo to Osaka and Kyoto. But do remember that there's two airports. There's a big airport in Tokyo. There's another big international airport in Osaka, and so you can fly into one and you can fly out of the other one. What I do really recommend for your first trip in Japan is focusing on one of those big city regions, either focusing on the Tokyo region or focusing on the Osaka and Kyoto region. And so I'm going to dive into those two areas as potential itineraries for your first trip. And then I've got about 6 other itineraries that you could connect to these two places if you have more than 10 days. But this is my base recommendation for 10 days. All right, so let's go ahead and dive back into Google Earth, and I want to go ahead and talk about Tokyo first as a place. And the first thing I want to say about Tokyo is Tokyo has 2 major airports. I lied. I fibbed. I gave a shortcut where I said Japan has 2 major airports, one in Tokyo and one in Osaka, but Tokyo itself has 2 major airports. The first one is Narita International Airport. That is the biggest airport in Tokyo, maybe the one that you're most likely to find flights to, but the one that you'll really want to fly into if you can is Haneda, because if we look on the map about where Narita was, compared to central Tokyo. And now we look at where Haneda is. Haneda is so much closer, where it may take you an hour and a half to get into the city from Narita. You can get in from Haneda in 30 minutes or less, depending upon where you're staying. Smaller airport, easier to navigate, so I would recommend you look at flights into Haneda or HND. Now, before I dive deeper into Tokyo as a place or a map, I want to orient us on transportation within Tokyo, because I said the way we understand Japan is by the bullet train routes. It's also the subway routes and the train routes, because that's how you're going to probably be spending most of your time getting around the country. And so within Tokyo, this is the map of all of the train routes of all of the different companies, all combined onto one map. And in particular, this map was designed for tourists to look at. Isn't that nice that these train companies provided this very easy to understand and comprehend train map? By the way, sarcasm is one of the many services that I offer today, and this thing is a nightmare to look at. Now, what you'll really want to think of when you go to Tokyo is you'll want to really pay attention to this line, the Yamanote Loop Line. This is run by Japan Railways, and people kind of think of it as a circle. On this map back here, it was that dotted green circle that you see around there. The trains kind of have a green line in color, so whenever you see it, it's kind of like green is the color. And these are the major stops that it goes to. The major stops are the ones that are bolded. And so when you're thinking about going to Tokyo, where should you stay? I would recommend you stay in one of those areas that are in bold, because those are the most well-connected. So Ueno, Tokyo, Shinagawa, Shibuya, Shinjuku, and Ikebukuro. Now, some of these are more well-connected than others. In particular, Tokyo and Shinagawa, they are connected to the bullet trains. And so if you're doing a lot of day trips to get out of Tokyo, those are going to be the most convenient. Shinjuku is basically Tokyo's second city center. And so that one's really convenient for transportation too, and is one of the busiest train stations in the world. Now, some other places I like to stay in Tokyo, I like to stay in Ginza, and you see it on this map. What's different about this map? This is the map not of all the train routes in Tokyo, but this is the map of just the Tokyo subway. These are the subway lines, and so Ginza is very well connected on the subway, as is Shinjuku that we talked about before, and there's a few major ones on here too. That are also other options. One I also really like is Asakusa. You see up there on the top. I'll show you that on the map where that is, but that is Tokyo's oldest temple, and so you can get around well using the subway, even though it's not connected directly to the Japan Railways train. All right, so I want to dive into Google Earth again, but I want to take a few comments from the chat before I do that. Brooklyn says, is that green line pay one price, ride all day? In general, most of the trains in Japan aren't that way, although you can get passes where you can pay one price and ride all day, but like it's cheap. It's like 200 yen for a ride, or 300 yen. You're paying like $2 or $3 US. Within Tokyo, it's really inexpensive. If you get a Japan Railways pass, which is like an all-you-could-ride sort of thing, then yes, you can ride all day. You just show your pass to get on or get off. But honestly, within Tokyo, it's really so cheap that I don't find it all that worth buying the all-you-can-ride passes when you're just staying in the city. Christoph says Tokyo is huge. Some of the school buses were 2 hours long. That is crazy. And yes, Tokyo is huge. And James says, I agree with Chris, concentrate on a specific region. Thank you for that, James. And so as we're doing this here, we're concentrating first on Tokyo. I'll tell you about that as a region. Then I'll talk about Osaka and Kyoto if you're interested in that as a region. And then we're going to talk about some of the other itineraries that you can connect with those two major itineraries. So in the Tokyo itinerary, what I recommend that you do for your first trip to Japan, going to Tokyo, is really 10 days in and around Tokyo, and you can stay in 1 or 2 hotels for those 10 days within the region. So going back to Google Earth, and we'll drop off James's comment. Okay, I'm gonna pull back again just so that we kind of get our perspective of where Tokyo is. Tokyo is here on this island nation of Japan, And as we zoom in, the center of Tokyo from an orientation perspective, if you notice there's kind of like one thing here in the center that looks different than all of it. This is the Imperial Palace. And so the Imperial Palace, most days you can't go into it. They do have occasionally a few times a year that you can go in, often timed with cherry blossoms. It's neat to walk around and see the palace, but don't expect to be greeted by the Japanese royalty while you're there. Now, what I recommend if you have a 10-day trip focused on the Tokyo region is spending, 3 or 4 days just roaming central Tokyo, roaming those different train stations that we saw on the JR Yamanote loop line. But some major attractions that I would encourage you to take a look at. One is Senso-ji. So this is the official name of Tokyo's oldest temple. Many people also call it Asakusa because that's the subway station name that you get off at if you're going to this temple. But it's this classic red temple. If we take a look at a picture of that right here, I'm sure you have seen this in pictures of Japan. It is probably the most iconic classic Japanese building in Tokyo. And what's neat about it is it has this long kind of like shopping promenade. Like here's all the places where people live, but there's this long shopping promenade that you go to get to that temple. There's the kind of 5-story pagoda that they have on the side. And then this is probably the place where actually everybody takes their picture, more so in front. Oh yeah, we can actually like go through this gate. All right, that's interesting. But this gate right here, where'd the little thing go that I can click on the, come on Google Earth, give me the little thing so I can click on the picture. There we go. And so this gate is a classic picture. You've seen YouTube thumbnails of it. And so this is where if you get off at Asakusa and you go to the temple, you first get a picture of this with kind of that red lantern there, and then you walk in and go into the temple. Okay, let's zoom out since Google Earth whacked out because I was in that building. All right, now I mentioned Tokyo Station, so let's go ahead and take a look at where the actual station named Tokyo Station is. Zooming out from Asakusa, this district here, there's all these high-rise buildings. Here's the Imperial Palace, here's Tokyo Station. So if you're taking the bullet train into Tokyo, that is where it's going to stop at, and that's where all those lines tee off from. The hotels here are going to be expensive, but you're going to be really well connected. The other area that I mentioned I like to stay is Shinjuku. And Shinjuku, so Tokyo Station is here, Shinjuku is over here. Oftentimes they call it Tokyo's second city or second city center because it's a hustling, bustling metropolis over here. Shinjuku has some of the best shopping in Tokyo. It is also famous for having Kabuki-cho for nightlife. There's kind of this pedestrian street that goes down this way. This is where you'll find a lot of like late night drinking. Although, it might be one of the places, if you've watched my scams video, that you might be most likely to be scammed, but really don't feel that Shinjuku is a super seedy area. Just if people are coming up to you on the street and offering for you to come to their bars, you probably want to pass on that opportunity. All right, so after you've spent your 3 days exploring the city center of Tokyo, it's time to take some day trips. What is the first day trip that you want to take? Well, the first day trip that I recommend for people out of Tokyo is to this place called Nikko. And Nikko is home to Japan's most lavishly decorated shrine. It's kind of up here in the mountains. It's about an 1.5-hour train ride outside of Tokyo. This is home to Shinto and Buddhist temples here in Nikko. And if we actually look for the shrine, the Toshogu Grand Shrine, Nikko is really a day trip in and of itself. And there's the town, and then over here is where the shrines are. And you would take the train right into here, so it would be easy. But if we kind of look at these gates right here, it's a really neat temple, and it's really colorful. There's some other like cat things and cat statues and grand shrines. And click on this and get a picture, right? You see, go take a look at things like that in Nikko. And it's one of those that I think a lot of people don't do because Gosh, they think it's far away, but I do think it is the most rewarding day trip to do outside of Tokyo is to visit Nikko up there. Now, something a little closer is Kamakura, although Kamakura isn't quite as grand as Nikko. Kamakura is down to the south of Tokyo, and you can see this is quite a bit closer to Tokyo. Kamakura is famous for Zen temples. So the temples in Kamakura are going to be less colorful. They're going to be more brown in color like this. And sometimes people call Kamakura the Kyoto of Eastern Japan. When you go to Kyoto, a lot of the temples look kind of this kind of brown, not as brightly colored as they are in Nikko. The other thing that Kamakura is famous for the Daibatsu, which is a giant Buddha, giant bronze Buddha that you can actually go inside. And this giant Buddha that's here, I mean, you see it's so big that you can see it here on Google Earth. But this Buddha, it used to have a temple around it, but the temple was, washed away in storms and earthquakes, and what remains is still this Buddha right there, which is a neat try. Like if you go to Kamakura, you definitely need to seek out that Buddha in addition to the various temples. Okay, so those are 2-day trips from Tokyo. Another spot that I recommend as a great day trip. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to plug like all my other videos as we do this, is Yokohama. All these places that I'm talking you through, I have a video on all of them. So I have a video on Nikko, I have a video on Kamakura, I have a video on Yokohama. You will find it in the Tokyo playlist that I've linked in the description of this video, including links to all the other areas that I suggest as part of your itinerary. So looking at Tokyo region here, Kamakura down here in the south, Yokohama kind of here in the middle. Yokohama is one of the most international cities in Japan because it was one of the first cities that was open to international trading. You will find the Yokohama Bay Stars play here, so if you want to see some Japanese baseball, you'll find it in Yokohama. And Yokohama is also famous for the Chinatown. They have a really neat Chinatown district, and it also has a couple of very large Ferris wheels, or observation wheels as they like to call them. It's kind of got like a neat theme park here with a roller coaster, and then right there you can see that big Ferris wheel in Yokohama. Lights up at night. The Japanese love their evening Ferris wheels. Okay, some other trips that you might consider taking as day trips from Tokyo are to visit Hakone, which is this region with hot springs near Mount Fuji. If you're doing the Golden Route, it's one they suggest. I really like Hakone. You can visit Nagano to see the snow monkeys. Nagano is famous for having the Winter Olympics there, and yes, you can see the snow monkeys in a day trip from Tokyo. You can even go as far south as Nagoya if you have a JR pass on the bullet train and see the castle down there. And then the final thing to do with your 10 days in Tokyo, if you're Disney fans, is to visit Tokyo Disney and to visit Tokyo Disney Sea. Those are the 2 Disney theme parks in Tokyo. And if you're going to do that, I actually recommend you move hotels and move to hotels that are right around Tokyo Disney. There's a whole bunch of hotels right in the Tokyo Disney area. That way you don't have to spend your time going back and forth to the parks, particularly spend a couple days there. And then if you're flying out of Narita Airport, well, Tokyo Disney's kind of on the way from Tokyo over to Narita Airport. All right. That's the Tokyo region. That's my recommended itinerary number 1 for your first trip. I have a second recommended itinerary, which is Osaka and Kyoto, if you want to focus more on the Kyoto region that I'm going to go into next. And then after that, I'll go into the other itineraries that you can connect to these. But before I do that, I want to dive into the chat to get some comments and questions I didn't get as we were going through Google Earth. The first one is Kathy says, definitely doing the Disney parks. Definitely you will enjoy it. Brandon says Tokyo Disney will be my 3rd Disney park. And if you've only got 1 day, there's 2 parks. There's Tokyo Disney, which is basically modeled after Disneyland or the Magic Kingdom. And then there's Tokyo Disney Sea, which is a park that's completely unique to Japan. So I would recommend you spend the most amount of time in Tokyo Disney Sea because it's the park that you won't see anywhere else in the world. The Uniplex says, Chris, can you take us along when you can to be the guide? I would love to do that sometime, Uniplex. And Kathy says she also has 3 Disney cruises booked as well. Well, that sounds pretty awesome. And Kathy also says the temples look fascinating. They are. And Steve says, since I'll be stuck in Narita Airport, what can I do inside there overnight? I'm reading everything closed at 9 p.m. Not much. Like everything. And Narita Airport oddly does close really early. So I don't know. I would try to actually get a hotel near the airport and just sleep there. There's not much to do right around Narita Airport. You know, you can take a bullet train into the city, the Narita Express, you know, about an hour. You can get to someplace reasonable. You can see a little bit of Tokyo, get back to the airport. I would not spend 17 hours at Narita Airport. That sounds really boring and torture. Christoph says, I would always see Mount Fuji on my way to school when I lived there. Yeah, particularly if you're taking the bullet train on the Golden Route from Tokyo down to Osaka, Kyoto, and you're sitting on the right-hand side or the side that faces inland instead of towards the ocean, there are super great views of Mount Fuji going that way. And Mrs. Clay says, I think I should use my 150,000 K frequent flyer miles to visit. You totally should. And Christoph says, I loved Disneyland Japan. Many birthdays were spent there, which is answering, I think, John's question about, is Disney in Japan good? It is. I love it. I think Disney in Japan is the best of all the theme parks. Gene says, is Tokyo Station the only station to pick up the Shinkansen? No. And if I go back to this graphic here, so on this line, this Yamanote loop line, and this isn't the Shinkansen line, but this is the thing you can think about that's central to Tokyo. There are 2 stations on this map, and frankly just 2 stations in Tokyo, or 3 actually, where you can get the Shinkansen, Ueno, Tokyo, and Shinagawa. But Tokyo is the one that like all the lines go into. Ueno picks them up as they go north, and then Shinagawa picks them up as they go south. So those are the 3 most connected if you're trying to ride the Shinkansen, but Tokyo Station is even more connected because it's the hub and all the spokes go out from there. But okay, now let's go ahead and dive into the Osaka and Kyoto region. This is my second recommended first time to Japan itinerary. Instead of doing the Golden Route, doing Tokyo, Kyoto, Osaka, all in the same thing, pick one of these regions and explore it. So let's go ahead and as we do that, first open up Google Earth, and we're gonna go ahead and check out, we're gonna fly over to Osaka. Now you'll notice when I say it, Osaka, the O is a long O, and that's how they pronounce it in Japan. If you're taking the trains and the train pulls into Osaka, it'll say Osaka, Osaka des. It's a really long O. So the region around Osaka is known as the Kansai region. That's kind of what they call this whole collection of prefectures and cities. The airport is Kansai International Airport. And so if we look at where the airport is, Kansai International Airport, it is a man-made airport that they actually built here in Osaka Bay. So it's a big modern airport, and it's well connected to the trains to get in. It's much easier to get in and out of Osaka Airport than it is either of the Tokyo, Haneda, or Narita airports. So I really like the access to and from Kansai International Airport. Now, my recommendation for you, if you're doing this as a region, you can totally stay in Osaka and use that as a base for your 10 days. You can stay in a hotel near Osaka Station for 10 days and not have to move hotels at all. If you do want to move hotels, then maybe you want to move over to Kyoto for a little while, but you can explore Kyoto from Osaka as well, because the bullet train runs between these 2 cities, and it's like 20 minutes to go between Osaka and Kyoto. So if you don't like changing hotels, you don't have to. In that case, what I would do is I would recommend you stay near Osaka Station, which is the main train station in Osaka, or Shin Osaka Station, which is the train station where the Shinkansen pulls into, or the bullet train. But we usually stay around Osaka Station. There's all these high rises, there's all this food here, there's tons of stuff, there's tons of hotels around here. Note though, this is where we've actually stayed at one of our worst hotels in Japan. We stayed at the Hotel Monterey, Osaka Umeda, which was like, which side is done? I don't know. But it faced the train lines, and it felt like the trains were like running through a hotel room. I mean, the good part is that the trains stopped running from about midnight to 5 a.m. in Japan, and so we got about 5 hours to sleep. But you might want to consider a hotel that, like, you know, you actually don't have a view of the trains. That might be better. All right, so in your 10-day trip to the Osaka region, some things that I recommend, like first one that you should do is you should visit Osaka Castle. So much like in Kyoto, they have the Imperial Palace that's the center of the city. The center of Osaka is this Osaka Castle. You see, it's the one part of Osaka that looks very different from the rest of the city because it's the one part of it that has a gigantic moat around it. Osaka Castle is worth at least a half day on your journey there. It's got like a number of different subway and train stations to stop at there, and I think it is like, I don't know this for a fact as numbers, but I feel like Osaka Castle is probably Japan's #1 visited castle. There are also some big attractions that are popular in Osaka. One is Dotonbori Street. If you ever see pictures of Osaka that have all these like crazy lights and signs, that's Dotonbori Street. It's in kind of the middle of the downtown district. Near that main train station, near Osaka Station, is one of the biggest outposts of Yodobashi. That's Japan's biggest electronics store. If you like electronics, you can while away 3 hours just inside Yodobashi. We generally do on every trip that we go. And then there's a fairly new attraction in Osaka that it doesn't have a name as cool as the Tokyo Skytree, which is Tokyo's big observatory. And so because this name is less catchy, I think less people go there. But the Abeno Harukas building is the tallest building in Osaka. As you can see right here, is this really tall building, and there's an observatory up on top. There's a neat shopping mall nearby, but this is a great place to go and get your bearings on Osaka as a region. There's also a neat Marriott in that building if you're looking to stay a little farther away from Osaka Station. The other final attraction I think is really worthwhile in Osaka is the aquarium that's called the Kyushu, but it's kind of a little bit like a ways out of central Osaka, and even though it is, if you like fish, and even if you don't like fish, if you're just a lover of marine things or you can appreciate animals or cool Japanese portrayals of animals, then you should visit the Osaka Aquarium. I wouldn't consider myself a huge sea life lover. I've been to some of the great aquariums in the US that include the Monterey Aquarium, the Baltimore Aquarium, and this one, like, I put above all of those. It's just a really awesome aquarium. And there's also a big giant Ferris wheel over here too. Can you tell they like their Ferris wheels? They sure like their Ferris wheels. I see in the chat, I'm not the only one. Emmett says he loves himself some aquariums too. All right, that's pretty neat. Okay, so now let's go ahead and talk about Kyoto. So I mentioned that Kyoto is just a kind of 20-minute train ride from Osaka, and like, it looks far, right? But it's actually not that far by train. And so if we zoom in to Kyoto, the thing about visiting Kyoto is Kyoto really, as a city, because it's old, does not have a super fantastic train transportation network. As a tourist, you're going to be getting around Kyoto primarily by bus. This station right here, this is JR Kyoto Station. Yes, it is like 10 or 14 stories tall. I think this train station is probably the coolest train station in all of Japan. You should plan to spend 2 or 3 hours just exploring this train station, particularly getting up to like the top levels that have these walkways between things. There's a whole food hall up on the top. There's department stores inside. if you want to dive deeper into that, I have a whole video just walking around that train station. And then just in front of the station, you see all these little blue bus things. There's a whole ton of bus routes that'll take you to all of the different classic temples that are in Kyoto. Another great way to get around Kyoto is by bicycle. Rent a bicycle and take your bicycle around, assuming you're there when it's not too cold. But, looking at the map of Kyoto, you can sort of see where the big temples are, because you can just, easily see where, oh, hey, that area looks a little bit different than the rest of them. I think Kyoto's worth 2 days, again, that you can do staying there, or you can do just as day trips in from Osaka. And yes, go get your picture with the Golden Temple in Kyoto. Okay, so zooming out from Kyoto, the couple other places that I recommend as day trips in the Osaka Kansai region. My first day trip outside of, you should go to Osaka, then you should go to Kyoto, then you should go to Nara. Nara is famous for their deer. There are 1,000 wild deer that live here in the city of Nara, and you can feed those deer. You can feed the deer from your hands in Nara. Super cool. Nara is worth a whole day of itself to go visit those deers, go check out some of their shopping streets. The other day trips you can take from this region, you can, if you're like kind of a, if you're into beef, you can visit Kobe, famous for its Kobe beef, although you can get really great Kobe beef in Osaka, in Kyoto. You can visit Nagoya right over here. Nagoya is home to another one of Japan's big castles. Nagoya is also where Toyota got started. So if you want to take a Toyota factory tour, you can do that over here in Nagoya. And finally, in Osaka, Osaka is also home to Universal Studios Japan, which is notable because this version of Universal Studios Japan has a Super Nintendo world. So if you want to see like Super Nintendo come to life, you can do it here at Universal Studios Japan. All right, so my itineraries that I'm going to walk through next after doing those two. So other things you might want to connect to these is Hokkaido, which is the island to the north. These would be kind of separate things. You go like, hey, I go to Tokyo, and then, I'm not in Japan for just 10 days, but I'm here for like 3 weeks. What are other places that I can go? So we're going to go through Hokkaido, then we're going to go through Tohoku, which is the region north of Tokyo, between Tokyo and Hokkaido. Then I'll walk you through where you might want to go if you're visiting central Japan. So this is the areas sort of northwest of Tokyo, Nagano and Kanazawa. I'll talk about Kyushu, which is all the way in the south, and then I'll wrap up with Fukushima prefecture here at the end. But before I get into those, I want to dive into some questions and comments in the chat. Brandon says, I knew you were going to follow up with Kobe, probably because I like beef, and Brandon knows that I like beef. Danielle says, was Nagoya or Osaka castles ever imperial residences? Here's the thing about the castles that exist in Japan is most of them were like what you really see remaining there are actually like the fortress or the keep. But Nara was a capital of Japan before Tokyo was or before Edo was. I will say there were like so many different former capitals of Japan that I feel like I lose track. All right, I need a drink. What's Chris drinking today? Today I am drinking a oolong milk tea from Omomo. And what's this say up here? It says on my drink, it had no ice and 50% sugar. That's how I get my oolong milk tea. Victor wanted a foot stomp that Nagoya has plenty to see. Don't skip out on it. And if you haven't yet and you're enjoying the stream, I would love if you like it. I see 112 people on and 64 likes. I would love to get this video up to 100 likes on the live stream. So please give it a like if you're enjoying this video. If you do like it, every like goes to provide a piece of premium bamboo to the Yellow Productions crew behind me. they are hungry, and it lets YouTube know that you enjoy the video, so YouTube spreads it to others. That's one of the best ways you can help me out, and all it's going to cost you is a mouse click. Kubrick Lover says, what is a good airline to take? Any of the Japan airlines are great to take. I like ANA, All Nippon Airways. I like Japan Airlines. There is a new airline going to Japan, Zip Air, which is a division of JAL. Japan Airlines is like their low-cost carrier. I've heard decent things about it if you kind of don't mind their a la carte pricing model. Singapore Airlines also makes a lot of connections in Tokyo, so that's another good option. Kubrick says, I've thought of Japan Airlines, but they seem to be pretty expensive. You know, you get what you pay for. That's what I say. Gene says, is Uber available in Kyoto? You know, Gene, it's been a while since I've not been to Kyoto since Uber has been around, but Uber often isn't available in a lot of parts of Japan because they have such a big taxi system. So I don't know. But if somebody else has been to Kyoto more recently, maybe you can help a fella explore. Joseph asks if you've experienced the capsule hotels in Japan. No, I haven't. I am a really light sleeper, and everybody that I know that has experienced them, they say all you hear all night are other people snoring all night, which that would be like a sleepless night for me. I've considered experiencing one simply to make a video for y'all. I just haven't done that yet. One tip that Zip Airlines is cheap. All right, thank you for that tip. Brandon is drinking a Coke. Xavier says, I lived in Japan for 2 years. And Jeff says, have you eaten at any Michelin star sushi spots in Japan? We ate at Sushi Sho, S-H-O, in Tokyo, which like Jiro is often considered like #1 in Tokyo, and Sushi Sho is considered like definitely within the top few. It was a $200 or $300 person sushi dinner. It was amazing. It was worth every penny. We can't do it again for 10 more years because we just can't afford those kind of dinners, but it's definitely one of those like once in a lifetime experiences. Painkiller remarks on staying in a capsule hotel, saying I tried one of them and it felt like staying in a hostel. I totally believe that. All right, by the way, I see 20 more likes. We're up to 83 likes now, so thank you for everybody who hit that like button. If you haven't yet, please get that mouse button over to that thumb up so that the Yellow Productions crew can get their evening dose of bamboo. All right, so let's dive into these other regions that I recommend you take a visit at. So let's pull up Google Earth from where we were here at Universal Studios, and let's back out because the next place we're gonna go to is Hokkaido, the island prefecture to the north of Japan. So this little island up here, big island. This big island is Hokkaido. And Hokkaido is probably most famous for being the snowy part of Japan. If you like to ski or snowboard and you're looking for some amazing snow, you're going to find the most ski resorts up here in Hokkaido. The Winter Olympics was held in Nagano, close to Tokyo. Why? There's more infrastructure in Tokyo. It's easy to get a lot of people there. There's not as much infrastructure up in Hokkaido, but you'll have more of the place all to yourself if you go up there. The capital of Hokkaido or the biggest city, is Sapporo right here. If you're flying in, this is where you'll likely fly into. If you're visiting Hokkaido, you'll likely fly. The train does connect here, like it goes under the water from the mainland. You can take it. It just takes a long time, so you should fly. The flights from Tokyo to Sapporo are like 90 minutes. They're pretty short, and the flight from Tokyo to Sapporo is the world's busiest short-haul route. Like every hour, there's a 747 that goes from Tokyo to Sapporo. It's impressive how many people do that route by air because they're big city centers. Now, looking at I say the way we want to understand regions is often kind of big transportation. So this is a big region, but the places that people go, we can take a look at this map right here. So the airport is called New Chitose Airport. Nabori Betsu in the south is a really great Japanese hot spring town. I really like that. Sapporo is a big city. It's also where they brew the beer. Otaru, famous for their sushi, kind of a seaside town. Asahikawa, like the other big city, there's a zoo in Asahikawa, And then Bie and Furano are famous for their nature, famous for lavenders, trees, just kind of like to go see Japanese farmland. One of the famous things up in Hokkaido, Hokkaido is famous for its milk, and Hokkaido is also famous for its melons. You can find a lot of melons. There's also a town in Hokkaido known as Sunflower Town. One of the ski resorts that we'd recommend to you is called Tomamu. I describe Tomamu as, maybe like the Vale or Whistler of Japan, although it's oh wow, this actually this didn't get me to the hotel that I was hoping it would get me to. But anyway, there is a really neat like integrated ski resort that's here that's got like bridges between all the buildings, and so like you can get to everything without having to go outside until you want to go outside. All right, so the next region I recommend to you is the Tohoku region. So the Tohoku region is the region of the mainland of Japan, kind of like north of Tokyo. So we got Hokkaido in the north, and then we got like all this stuff that's over here. This is what is referred to when people say Tohoku. The Shinkansen line that runs from Tokyo to the north is known as the Tohoku Shinkansen. So if we take a look at that on a map, these are the prefectures that make up Tohoku prefectures. They're like provinces, or they're like states and other places. And you can see on this map some of the names of them and some of the popular things that are in there. But looking at those various areas, the other big castle that I want to point out to you in the top of this map is in Aomori, Hirosaki Castle. I think it's probably the coolest castle I've been to. It's like way off the beaten path, but if you're there in cherry blossom time, it is truly beautiful. Lots of hot springs in here, lots of other temples that you can take a look at. This is a great region to go to if you want to really experience like Japan, and not like big city Japan, but like experience rural Japan. All right, and in the chat, I see Rochelle says, "Hi, quick question. Does one need the poke to enter Japan?" Currently, yes. So yeah, you do need to be vaccinated to enter Japan, but you don't need to take they've done away with the COVID tests, and they've done away with the quarantines. It's gonna be a while before Japan gets rid of the mask mandates and those sort of things, but Japan is indeed open for tourism. Mrs. Clay says, what about renting a car to tour around Japan? Yeah, absolutely. So for some of the regions I'm gonna go to next are actually ones that are great to rent a car for, particularly when I talk through Kyushu and Kanazawa and Fukushima. Those are ones I recommend a car for. I've rented a car. We rent a car now almost every time we go, because almost every time we go now, we visit one of the big cities for a few days, and then we like to just kind of get off into the rest of Japan. And the roads are clean and calm and nice and well maintained, and the drivers are polite. In the cities, it's rough. Don't get me wrong. I don't like to drive in Tokyo. I don't like to drive in Osaka. What I like to do is I like to take the train out of those big cities, and then from one of the suburban train stations, rent a rental car from there. Toyota rental car rents rental cars. Red Lily says, how is parking in Tokyo and other major cities? In Tokyo, it's the pits. Nobody drives in Tokyo. Don't drive in Tokyo. Don't try to park in Tokyo. Just park your car once and then get around. But in at least the minor cities, I would say parking's pretty good. It's just, it might not be super close up that you might expect. You might end up in one of those parking structures where they put your car in like a carousel. They have these things that are like car elevators as valet parking. You put the car in it, and then it takes your car and parks at some place. You don't actually park it, and neither do they. It's like a whole robotic parking thing. P says, I heard you need a special license. You don't. You just need to get what's called an international driver's permit, which basically, if you go to AAA, it's a translation of your driver's license. It costs like $20, has your picture in it. It's not a new license. It's just a administrative requirement, honestly. Japan has a lot of paperwork and administrative requirements that they really like. John asks if I can get my sushi microwaved at the restaurant. Yeah, if you're a 7-Eleven, get your sushi microwaved, no problem. Okay. And Alex says, do you still need to download an app and give the Japanese government's updates on where you go? I don't believe so. I believe they've done away with that. They're sort of like not like Big Brother sort of thing about where you go. Xavier says, I used to take a train over an hour to get to Tokyo because it's so much easier. It is, like in Tokyo, in Osaka, just don't drive in the center because it's a nightmare. All right, so now let me go into these other regions. We're gonna talk about central Japan next, Nagano and Kanazawa. So zooming in, back to Tokyo right here. And actually, as I do this, I want to pull up this map first, which is the Shinkansen line running out of Tokyo over to Kanazawa. But before I do that, because I forgot to show you this one, this is the Shinkansen line that runs up in the Tohoku region. So I said, like, all the transport you're going to do out of Tokyo is on the Shinkansen around Japan to make big movements. And so this is where the bullet train runs along that Tohoku region. You can see there's a couple spurs that take you over to the other coast. Now, this bullet train line is one of the newest bullet train lines in Japan. It runs from Tokyo to the mountains in Nagano and then over here to Kanazawa. Kanazawa is really neat because it's often referred to as Little Kyoto. I know that I said that there was this other place near Tokyo, Kamakura, that was like the eastern Kyoto. Well, Kanazawa has even more classic temples, classic gardens, streets that look like Kyoto without the overrun of tourists in Kyoto. So if we look at that on Google Earth, and we find Tokyo over here, and so that Shinkansen line runs up this way into the mountains, and then it comes up over here to Kanazawa on this side. Now, there's a lot of other things along this coast here, and this little peninsula right here, this is called the Izu Peninsula. This is famous for like hot spring towns. There are some other neat old towns that are over here. This is a great place to like take the Shinkansen out here over to Kanazawa, and then from Kanazawa, pick up your rental car, and then drive it around this whole other coast of Japan because it's not busy over here. There's plenty of parking over here, easy to park your car. What I will say though about driving in Japan, if you're renting a car, is there's no street parking in Japan. Like street parking doesn't exist. In many places around the world, you can park your car on the side of the road for free. And in Japan, you can't. You need to pay to park your car pretty much most places, or you park in a 7-Eleven or a restaurant parking lot. You park in a parking lot, but you don't park on the side of the street. That just takes some mental math to get used to when you're looking for parking. And Kubrick says, where is the Daibatsu? Yes, the Daibatsu is in Kamakura. That's the one closer to Tokyo. Heather asks if I speak Japanese. No, but I speak enough to like order at a restaurant my ramen or my gyoza. All right, the next region I recommend is Kyushu, which is this kind of, it looks like an island down here in the south, but it's actually not technically an island. And the bullet train will run all the way down here. This is great to connect to Osaka and Kyoto because you can take the bullet train here in a couple hours. You can also fly into Fukuoka. There's a decent airport here. Now, before I kind of zoom you through the map like this, I want to show you this other map of it. Right here. So this is the train road map of Kyushu down in the south, and you can see the dotted line in the middle. That's the Shinkansen or the bullet train that runs down, and you can see it runs into Fukuoka, and then it runs down south into Kagoshima. Where it doesn't go to Nagasaki, and it doesn't go to Oita or Beppu. And then you see all these little like brown icons on there. Those are all the hot springs in Kyushu. Kyushu has some of the most dense region for hot springs. Some of the best hot spring hotels in Japan are here in Kyushu. So if you like hot springs, you'll definitely want to visit Kyushu. And Kyushu is definitely a place that while you can take the train and the buses around, it's better to drive. Like rent a car and drive around here. If you are driving in the winter when it snows, then you'll want to get snow tires, which indeed you can get. But taking a look at Google Earth this way, Nagasaki over here in the south, you'll want to drive over there. And then there's this whole kind of like mountain town here in the middle around this volcanic crater. And then over here on the coast, there are these like onsens or Japanese hot springs that'll like bury you in the sand and in the mud. We definitely really enjoyed our trip to Kyushu. And this is actually one of my favorite vlogs that we did was from Kyushu. I called it the vlog of like fire and ice. You can find that in the Kyushu playlist. But we saw like this really amazing at a Japanese temple, like one of the festivals where they like burn these logs, and it was something crazy. Really seemed out of a movie as opposed to something we were actually there watching. Mrs. Clay says she loves hot springs. In that case, you will enjoy Kyushu. Definitely dive into my Kyushu playlist to check out. We stayed in like three hot spring hotels in our 7 days in Kyushu that were totally amazing. All right, there's one that I want to point out that's not like formally on my list of places. But there's this island here called Shikoku Island. And like, if you really want to get off the beaten path in Japan, you can visit Shikoku Island. There's this cool place over here called Naruto. And there is this bridge right here that there are like whirlpools under this bridge. That's like, or is it maybe under this bridge over here? Yeah, I think it could be under this bridge. Here we go. The Naruto whirlpools. And this, like Google Earth probably doesn't do it justice, but if you've ever seen like a cartoon where they're like sea monsters in these whirlpools, those things actually exist for real. And they have them here, and you can take a boat trip out to go see these whirlpools that'll like suck you in to be eaten by the sea monsters. Obviously they, the Japanese, I trust them to not end up, like taking the ship down in the whirlpool and making it a submarine. But that was kind of one of the neatest natural wonders we've seen in Japan. All right, the final region that I want to talk you through is Fukushima Prefecture. And while Fukushima Prefecture is part of the Tohoku region, the northeast region that I talked through earlier, I want to mention it in particular because it's the kind of almost closest to Tokyo. It's a great place if you want to rent a car and get out of the city. And Fukushima, gets a lot of like bad rap because of the Fukushima nuclear disaster, which is like way over here on the coast. If you look at how big this prefecture is, it's huge. So there's tons of great cultural attractions in Fukushima in what they call the Aizu region, which is the mountainous region. And if we take a look at that in kind of a map form, the dotted line up here, this is the Shinkansen line, this is the bullet train line. So there's two big stations in Fukushima. There's Koriyama and there's Fukushima. But then the places that you really want to get to are over on the left side of it on your screen. Aizu Wakamatsu, there's a famous castle in Fukushima that has red tile roofs. There's this lake, there's a big lake that's there. Why would you go see a lake? They have this thing called splashing ice where the ice actually like splashes and then freezes in the splash configuration. Oichi-juku is this super neat mountain town where the houses are built of, the roofs are built of like 4 to 8 foot thick of hay still in this day and age. And then Kitakata, if you like ramen, is one of the most famous ramen cities in all of Japan. It's a light ramen, and many people who live in Kitakata eat ramen for breakfast.
Fellow explorers, it is now Q&A time. If you've got a question, I've got an answer.
All right, fellow explorers, you are now well armed for your first trip to Japan. If you're watching the archive after this, definitely dive into some of those playlists I've got in the description to go through all those different regions. I've got over 100 videos on Japan, so you'll definitely find something to your liking. But now let's go ahead and take some questions from the chat, and I'm gonna move the questions to one of my screens here. Oh, by the way, to do this, when I do the Google Earth ones, I've got like five monitors in front of me, 4 monitors plus the camera screen. So a lot of screens when I do the Google Earth ones. So that's why you see me looking around in a lot of different places. Tesla Coil says, are you thinking of taking the Spunky Prince to Japan? We definitely are. Is it going to be in 2023 or 2024? I don't know, but we are waiting for Japan to relax their mask mandates before we take the Spunky Princess there. We just don't think it'll be a whole lot of fun to be masked up inside all the time. So that's what we are waiting for. There was a question. People said, hey, what do you think about guided tours? Painkiller says, I did an anime-themed guided tour. I enjoyed it. I think I wouldn't do 2-week bus tour of Japan, but I think joining one for a day or 2 or 3, you can actually learn some things and get a whole different perspective that way. Wu Tai asks if I've been to Sapporo. Sure have. One of the first videos we did on Japan is in Sapporo. So if you want to see Chris from 10 years ago, you can see our Sapporo travel guide. Shan Shan says, have you seen Between Earth and Sky Japan? Not yet, but maybe I will check that out. Brandon says, wait till 24. That's probably when it's going to end up. And Chris559 says, I'm on the 405 southbound at Santa Fe, traffic flowing. Keep up the good work, buddy. Chris, I hope you don't have too much rain where you are right now, because it's pretty rainy in Southern California right now. Lucky Cat Adventures says, have you been to Okinawa? Not yet. I'd like to go to Okinawa, but it's a place where the flights are just really expensive. I watched a lot of videos on Okinawa. Just M says, FYI, you do not have to be vaccinated with the COVID vaccine to enter Japan. However, you've not received 3 doses, then you must have a negative COVID test before boarding. All right, Just M, thank you for clarifying the probably slightly incorrect or incomplete information that I shared earlier. Junie says, enjoy Kura sushi and our ramen for 65% cheaper there. And probably fresher, I would imagine, at Kura than you get here. Brooklyn Joe says, if you decide to go to Disney last 2 days, would you leave out of Narita instead? I probably would leave out of Narita instead. And I don't hate leaving out of Narita, but yeah, it really depends what part of Tokyo you're staying in, whether it makes more sense to go to Haneda, more sense to Narita. If you're staying near Tokyo Station, then Narita could make a lot of sense, because there's the Narita Express train. It's like a direct train that takes you from Narita Airport into Tokyo Station, so that's what we do if we're staying there. But then if we're staying in some place like Ginza, then Haneda works a lot better for that. Also, the last time we went, when we did our Fukushima trip, we stayed on our first night in Tokyo in Asakusa, and so there's a direct train from Haneda to Asakusa that we took to get there. Yeah, and Painkiller clarifies their tour, says, hey, the tour wasn't 100% anime all the time. We did the main tourist sites in Japan like Tokyo, Hakone, Hiroshima, Kyoto, as well as seeing anime stuff in Kyoto and the like. All right, thank you for clarifying that. P-Nguyen says, oddly, Chris from 10 years ago looks like a present Chris. Yeah, I don't age all that much. It turns out I'm actually a Japanese artificial intelligent robot. That's why I look the same all the time. Derek asks if I've been to Arashiyama for monkeys. I have not been there. I've been to Nagano for the snow monkeys, but not there. Let me know if I should. Kubrick Lover says, is Japan cheaper than people think? I think so. It is. I could do a whole probably video about Japan is cheaper than you think, because right now the yen's pretty cheap, but hotels are pretty cheap, transportation's pretty cheap, food's pretty cheap. I mean, you can eat some really expensive food in Tokyo, but you don't have to. So we actually find Japan to be a really inexpensive destination to go to, particularly as compared to other big cities in the world like Paris or New York City. Tokyo is probably half the price. Peter says, what town area is the center for sumo? Tokyo. There's a sumo museum in Tokyo, and I don't remember the name of actually where that is, but we visited the sumo museum because we're dorks that way in Tokyo. Jamba says, what do Japanese think of American tourists? That's probably like a whole video in and of itself. I don't want to speak for the Japanese as a whole, but I'll say 2 things. I mean, I think they appreciate Americans visiting Japan, spending money, enjoying their country. I think they probably find Americans to be loud and rude at times, but those are all things that as Americans, or Westerners, and now there might be some of you that are like, Chris, I don't resemble a loud and rude American. Yeah, okay, well, Canadians, you get lumped together with us. So I always try to make sure I'm not the loud, rude American. And Junie says, Ryogoku in Tokyo. Thank you for that. And Kubrick Lover says they seem to be friendly people. I think they are. James says, sushi, ramen, or curry? What is your favorite? Sushi's more expensive, and so I guess if I'm not paying, then I prefer sushi. I probably like curry more than ramen, and then ramen's probably third on this list. Not to say that I don't like ramen, but you asked me which ones are my favorite, so that is how I would order those three. Painkiller says, related to inexpensive places, that it can be the same for LA. LA can be inexpensive too. For sure, it can if you know where to look. Larry says, Chris, do you know any good sushi in Japan? For sure, I do. Probably can't rattle them off for you. In Japan is such a big place. I've had so much good sushi in Japan that I probably honestly, most sushi restaurants in Japan are pretty good and better than their counterparts most other places. Painkiller personally would choose ramen from those top three. All right, hey. That's your number one of those top three. Jamba says, how old were you on your first trip to Japan? 20, 23, 24, something like that, to my first trip to Japan. Just M says, where to get the best pork cutlet in Japan and the best ramen? Oh, best ramen is really a controversial subject because there's so many different styles and varieties of ramen. Do you want pork broth ramen? Do you want chicken broth ramen? Do you want seafood broth ramen? Do you want a vegan ramen? Do you want it thick? Do you want it thin? What kind of noodles do you want? Do you want thick noodles? Do you want thin noodles? Do you want spicy noodles? So there's probably not, look, I'm sure there are some people that'll tell you this is the best ramen spot in Japan, but they're lying because there's the best ramen spot for different people. But I think, places that you find the best ramen, you find a lot of the best ramen in Kitakata as a city, and you'll also find a lot of great ramen in Fukuoka, in Kyushu, in the south. And then you'll also find really great ramen in Hokkaido, around Sapporo in the north. I feel like those are the three big ramen areas in Japan. And then to get great pork cutlets, in most department stores, they'll have a food floor at the top of sit-down restaurants, and you'll almost always find a breaded pork cutlet, breaded pork katsu restaurant up there. And I haven't honestly had any that are really, really bad. Alex says, how do you deal with a stroller with all the stairs at the train stations? We don't. That's how we don't. There's the train. Honestly, Japan is really unfriendly for strollers, wheelchairs in the public transportation because there are few elevators, long lines. In Tokyo Station, there's only one or two elevators in the whole place. So you just either end up carrying it up the stairs, or you find the elevator, or you just, bring it. You put the baby in the backpack. That was actually how we ended up with our Osprey baby carrier backpack. We asked a friend of ours who took his kids to Japan, and we asked him that question, and he said, I didn't bring a stroller. I put them in a backpack, and I carried my kids in a backpack. So there you go. Jamba says this is a wheelchair-friendly place to visit. No, not really. At least not in the big cities, because there's so many stairs and staircases, particularly in the subway. Lizzie says, how do you feel traveling in Japan with a child? We've been apprehensive to book because of this. We have not been there with the Spunky Princess yet. What I have heard from other people with kids, and it obviously depends on their age, is that it's challenging. It's challenging with young kids. Though I've heard plenty of people who've said, hey, they've had a great time with it, but you do have to know that you're gonna have a hard time with your stroller. The restaurants probably won't let you bring your stroller in because there's no room. So I would wait until your kids are maybe out of strollers and can walk and traverse the staircases in the subways, maybe before you go. Or if you just like me, I just carry the Spunky Princess on my, I don't even use the backpack anymore. I just carry her up my shoulders, or I carry her like this. I've been working on my bicep curls to do that.
Yes, it's the time you've been waiting for. It's time for the giveaway.
All right, fellow explorers, as usual, I give away a t-shirt on every live stream. Today I'll be giving away a Spunky Princess t-shirt. We've had a lot of conversations about Spunky Princess kids travel, and so in this live stream, I recommended one aquarium to visit in Japan. What is the aquarium that I recommended you visit while you're in Japan? What city is it in? That'll make it easy, and if you answer that correctly, you will win this shirt. And wow, somebody has the answer really quick before everybody else, because I think they just thought that that's what I would say. So,
and now we have a winner chicken dinner.
Paint Killer 93, congratulations. You were the first to answer Osaka. And then 6 seconds later, second place is Brandon Torres. And in third place is Dining with Derek. But Painkiller 93, you win. Send me an email to chris@yellow-productions.com. You'll find a link in the description below. If you're wondering, hey, when is the next live stream? Well, just head over to update.yellow-productions.com. I'm thinking next week it's going to be on Monday as opposed to Tuesday, which we've been doing it lately. But if you sign up for that email list, you'll be the first to know of what day it's going to be. And if you wanted to pick up a shirt and you didn't win one, well, just head over to the Yellow Productions shop at shop.yellow-productions.com. And I hope you enjoy your Japan trip, whether it's your first time, your second time, your third time, or your 20th time, maybe like us, but every time we enjoy it. Thank you for everybody who liked this video. We did get it up to 100. Thank you very much. We're now up to 112 likes. But if you didn't like it yet, hey, you still got time to give it a thumbs up. And fellow explorers, I see, Painkiller 93 is very nice, saying we don't need the t-shirt. You can give it to the second place person. So Painkiller 93, you are very honorable with that one. And so with that, Brandon Torres, congratulations through the nicety of Painkiller 93. You win the Yellow Productions shirt. All right, well, fellow explorers, as usual, I won't say goodbye because I'm going to see you in the next video.